Hey, we finally got some good news about the New Orleans Saints. They designate Trevor Penning to return. What does that mean for the team? And the NFC South, still awful. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. Of course, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media. You find me over at CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs going to help you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Tell you more about them later, but let me tell you more about today's episode. So we're going to take a look at how the New Orleans Saints can beat the Pittsburgh Steelers this weekend. What has to go right in order for the Saints to win? So we'll get to stifling that Pittsburgh Steelers defense that looks like it's going to see a big boost in the return of TJ Watt. How do you, as an offense, avoid that type of disruption? We'll break that down, especially with a injured and hampered offensive line. So we'll get you some injury updates in there as well. We'll also take a look at how it is that you topple this Steelers offense, which has struggled to do something that we have not seen across the NFL so far this season. Like, they've struggled in a way that's really specific. So we'll break that down, especially with the rookie quarterback woes that come with it. But first, finally, some good news for the New Orleans Saints. First of which, offensive tackle Trevor Penning, who you remember the New Orleans Saints drafted in the first round, along with wide receiver Chris Olave in this year's draft, has been designated to return from injured reserve. He had that turf toe injury, which resulted in surgery, full dislocation of that big toe. I almost said big pinky toe, but big toe, which required surgery, and then about 8 months of rehabilitation, being in a walking boot, all of these other things. So he was finally designated to return from injured reserve. So that means that he now has a 21-day practice window, or 3 weeks, basically, to make it back to the active roster. They can take their time, get him, back into the swing of things in terms of practice, and then make the decision to move him back to the active roster. The only caveat is that if for any reason he doesn't make it back to the active roster in those 21 days, then he would go to season-ending injured reserve at that point. But that doesn't seem likely. We spoke with him yesterday. I'll have some clips that I'll share on YouTube Shorts, and then find a way also to get them over to the audio side for you. Probably lump them into to some episodes next week too, but to where he kind of, like, in very descriptive detailed out how the injury happened, what needed to happen in order for him to do that, but also what he's been working on and how confident he feels about getting back out on the field, and how much he's looking forward to being a part of one particular play, which of course is one of those Taysom Hill quarterback powers, any type of power run right behind him. He's looking forward to being back in there. So what does it mean for the New Orleans Saints to welcome Trevor Penning back within the next few weeks? Let's just say it that way. Well, there's a couple of different things, right? He's a boost in your run game for sure. He's absolutely tenacious in the run game. We saw that all throughout his college tape. We also saw that in the preseason as well. We'll have to see if he's made those strides in terms of developing as a pass blocker. We started to see that in the preseason, but then he's been on ice effectively for 10 weeks. He hasn't been able to do pass sets, anything like that. So that's something that we'll have to wait and sort of see how that all works out. But in any case, he gives you a boost in the run game. And as he continues to develop in the passing game, then that's great for you too. So that's the guy that the Saints are hoping to be their franchise left tackle. Saints are also dealing with injuries elsewhere on the offensive line. Right now, Eric McCoy is very likely to be out this weekend. So they are moving Cesar Ruiz to center. That's at least what happened during the game last week against the Baltimore Ravens. So that means that Calvin Throckmorton has had to plug in at right guard. Right now, Andrus Peat also dealing with an injury. If he can't go, then that would mean that you would have Lewis Kidd plug in at a guard position as well, the undrafted free agent, who has shown that he is very talented all across the offensive line. But one of the places that getting Trevor Penning back helps is that now all of a sudden your starter at left tackle in James Hurst becomes available to you at one of those guard spots. So you get another member of your starting five back into that mix when you get Trevor Penning back. So if you deal with long-term injuries at center or at left guard, you're a little bit better off with having another starter that rolls into that position once you have Trevor Penning back as your perennial starter at left tackle. So that's one of the other big reasons that ends up impacting you. And of course, your front five, having a guy up there that's maybe coming from another position that has been filling in for somebody, getting him in there and having him at another position is still helpful, even though you're playing him at a different position, because then everybody knows the signals, everyone knows the cadences. It's massively helpful for the quarterback as well. So there's lots of good stuff that comes with that. So that's another place where getting Trevor Penning back can benefit you. That's not the only good news that the New Orleans Saints got, though. If you were a viewer and if you partake in Thursday Night Football, you got to see that, hey, the NFC South is still abysmal. And because of that, technically, the New Orleans Saints are very much still alive. There is a chance that the New Orleans Saints win in Pittsburgh, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lose to Seattle, and all of a sudden the Saints are right back in it at a three-way tie for first place. Now, technically, they would be behind the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in that case, but they hold the tiebreaker against the Atlanta Falcons, who absolutely wet the bed on national television last night with tons of questionable decisions from Marcus Mariota, a head coach that says that he doesn't want to change the quarterback or didn't think about changing the quarterback. And if they do change the quarterback, they've got to go to a rookie quarterback who I think is very talented in Desmond Ridder. But as Chris Carter, host of Locked On Steelers, pointed out about Kenny Pickett, being the most pro-ready quarterback doesn't mean that you're ready to go in and like knock all the lights out, right? It just means that you're ready to get your butt kicked in a very encouraging way. And that's probably the best you're going to get from Desmond Ridder in the middle of his rookie season. So good signs for the New Orleans Saints as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers continue to struggle. If they continue their struggles this week in Germany after the big travel day that they'll take up against the Seattle Seahawks team that has been surprisingly efficient with Geno Smith just like being lights out so far this season. If the Saints can go to Pittsburgh and win against a rookie quarterback and a struggling team, then all of a sudden the Saints have a little bit more optimism around them. Then they're hosting a beaten up Los Angeles Rams team that that has also not been what we expected that they would be going into the season. Then you travel to San Francisco and things might get a little bit dicey there, but still that's a team that hasn't lived up to expectation either. So, lots of good things, possibilities for the New Orleans Saints. The door's not entirely closed, but it all kind of has to start for them this weekend. So let's start with the Saints defense up against the Steelers offense. What can the Saints do on the defensive side to take advantage of a rookie quarterback and an offense that has been so stagnant that they're the only team in the NFL to not have done something that feels very, very basic. We're going to break that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell you about our friends over at LinkedIn. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the #1 place voted by small businesses across the country for delivering quality candidates, quality hires versus all of their leading competitors. They want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you want to go and check out LinkedIn Jobs today, because they're going to help you find the right people for your team faster. And you're going to love this part, for free. I use LinkedIn all the time, or used to use LinkedIn all the time when I was looking for jobs. So if you're somebody that's hiring, they make it super simple. You get screening questions to make sure that they meet your criteria and have the level of experience that you're looking for. They allow you to put the purple hiring frame up on your profile to help spread the word about the fact that you're hiring. There's no better place to go than LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs will help you find the quality candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. The Pittsburgh Steelers offense is not the greatest offense in the NFL. New Orleans Saints defense might be dealing with some injuries, but if the right players step up, they're going to be able to help to limit the Pittsburgh Steelers and keep them limited, as the Steelers have not been able to do something that seems very, very basic all season. Can the Saints keep it that way? We're going to discuss how they can and what that is as we continue on. Don't forget to also go and check out Locked On Sports Today. Thank you for making us your first listen. Now go and make that show your second listen. From all the games that matter to the bigger stories around sports, go beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes with the local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right. The Pittsburgh Steelers are the only team in the NFL on the offensive side that have not scored a touchdown from outside of the red zone. Their longest touchdown so far this season is that of 8 yards. Yikes. Let's just be real. Yikes. That is not a very good offense. And for those of you that are Louisiana sports fans, beyond just being Saints fans, but Louisiana sports fans, you know Matt Canada. You've seen this before. Matt Canada offenses don't move the ball like that. They want to dink, they want to dunk, they want to run, they want to pick up, 4 yards, 5 yards, 1 yard, 4 yards, 5 yards, 2 yards. That's the way that Matt Canada offenses like to move. Screen passes, little jet sweeps, quick drags. That's the way that this team wants to operate. So expect to see some screens, expect to see those throws out to the flats, all of those things, especially with a rookie quarterback as well. So for the Saints, there are a couple of key ways to keep Pittsburgh doing what they've been doing all season. First of which is kind of the basics, right? Cover well over on the outside, eliminate the middle of the field, put pressure on the quarterback, right? But there are some specifics here. Pittsburgh is going to give everything away pre-snap. And this is one of the things that Chris Richard talked about, New Orleans Saints co-defensive coordinator, Chris Richard spoke about with us in his presser on Thursday. Pre- and post-snap indicators are the thing that's going to tell the story for the New Orleans Saints defense in this game, catching on to what Pittsburgh does. So for instance, there may be some things that Pittsburgh does before the snap that tip off what it is that they're going to do. So when you see maybe a player go in motion, if that player goes in motion but then returns back to the same spot, that might tell you what it is that they're looking to do or eliminate some things that they're no longer looking to do. Whereas if that player goes in motion from one side of the field to the other side of the field, that might indicate something more. So let's say if the team starts off with a 2x2 set, which would mean, let's say, a wide receiver on the far outside, a tight end in line on the same side. So you've got 2 pass catchers on one side, and then let's say you have an X receiver and a slot receiver over on the opposite side, or a Z receiver and a slot receiver over on the opposite side. Then you've got 2 receivers on that side. So that's 2x2. 2 pass catchers on one side of the formation, 2 pass catchers on the other side of the formation. If one of them motions to the other side and then creates a 3x1 formation, that might signal this is a passing play for the New Orleans Saints offense. There are also pre-snap indicators like what we saw in Carolina, types of stuff that ended up getting Matt Rule kicked out of that building, was if the running back was in line with the quarterback in shotgun right next to him on his hip, it was a run play. If he was a step off, a step down, a step back, it was a passing play. Those types of pre-snap indicators are the things that the Saints are going to be looking for. And the good news for the Saints is that they're not going to change up a ton of it because you have a rookie quarterback that's still learning your system. So some of these pre-snap indicators he needs as well. So you can't go around changing them up too much on a week-to-week basis. Now, the tricky part for the Saints is that they're coming off of 6 days of rest. The Pittsburgh Steelers are conveniently coming off of 14 days of rest. So there's been more time to make those types of changes because they've had 2 weeks in between. So that will be something to watch. The chess match before the snap, having an understanding of that is the way that the New Orleans Saints defense can put some pressure on that Steelers offense in making it tough for them to produce. Speaking of pressure, I mentioned that there are some things that are like basic, right? Cover well, take away the middle of the field options, which is going to be a little bit challenging, right? You've got Kaden Elliss now serving as will linebacker. It seems like Pete Werner is going to be out. I'm just going to tell you what I've heard a little bit. It's not soon that he comes back. I haven't heard anything in terms of like specifics of what the injuries are, or if it's something that's going to keep him out for multiple weeks. But if we look at the Saints' track record of injuries so far this season and the types of injuries that these players have had to deal with, which aren't soft tissue injuries, they're these impact injuries, ligament damage, broken bones, dislocations, all of those things. That kind of tells you what you need to know, right? So don't expect to see Pete Werner back this weekend. I wouldn't expect to see him back next week either. But that's just me. We'll see exactly what happens. So that would mean Kaden Elliss at the wheel spot. Now, they taught Kaden Elliss every single position at the second level the moment that he was drafted. This is what they prepared Kaden Elliss for. I think he'll do well, but he's not Pete Werner, right? Pete Werner has been one of those guys that's been kind of all over the place and producing everywhere. We'll see what Kaden Elliss can do in that situation. So you want to take away the middle of the field, you want to cover well, and you want to put pressure on Kenny Pickett. But there's a key when it comes to putting pressure on Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett has a 109 passer rating when blitzed, but he has a 61 passer rating when pressured. What does that mean? That means that Kenny Pickett does a good job of getting the ball out in the direction of the blitz. So if you have a blitzer coming off of the right edge, he does a good job recognizing that and getting the ball out of his hands. However, when he is pressured, that passer rating drops to 61 in terms of his NFL passer rating. So that means if you can get pressure with your front four, then you have a real opportunity there to be able to limit what it is that he does. Now, the Saints haven't had the most consistent success doing that, but they have seen themselves be able to get that done. This would be an opportune time for that defensive line to really stand up in this game. There is one exception, though. Demario Davis. Demario Davis has not taken that many pass rushing snaps so far this season, but he has been incredibly efficient, something he told us the other day when he met with us for a press conference that he's very proud of. Here's an example of that. 126 pass rushing snaps last season for Demario Davis through 16 games. Remember, he missed that game against Miami, as did like everyone. That's 7.9, so let's just say 8 pass rushing snaps per game. So he was going after the pass rusher about 8 times per game last year. With that, he ended up with 3 sacks and 18 pressures on the season. So far this year, 40 pass rushing snaps. So he's averaging over the course of these 9 games just over 4 pass rushing snaps per game. So half as often as he was rushing the passer on a per game basis from last year. However, he's doubled his sack production, already a career high 6 sacks, and he's already got 13 pressures as compared to last year's 18 pressures. So he's been incredibly efficient as a pass rusher. He's the guy that you blitz when you make the decisions to do so. And they've already been selective about when they're doing it, right? It's a lot of long and late downs, late and long downs. It's got to be the right down and distance for them to send him. But when they do, he's been outstanding. And if you can send him right up the middle at a rookie quarterback, you'll take that on those 3rd and 8 and longer shots over and over and over again. All right, coming up next, what about the New Orleans Saints offense? After a not so great showing against the Baltimore Ravens, they're set to go up against another tough defense that could be getting a quarter of its defensive salary cap back. I'll explain what that means here in a moment with TJ Watt. So how do you produce against TJ Watt and the Pittsburgh Steelers defense? We'll break that down as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. First, I want to tell you about our friends over at Simply Safe. Today's episode is brought to you by Simply Safe, the leader, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to home security. If you've been putting it off in terms of checking it out and thought about securing your home with home security, then I want you to listen up, because right now you're going to be able to get and order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. The biggest offer of the year. You do not want to miss it. It's really awesome. I've got it here. Love all of the different gadgets and things like that come with it to make sure that everything is secure, especially with all the traveling that I do during football season. It's nice to just have that peace of mind that everything's safe and be able to check in anytime that I want. If I had kids, I'd probably buzz in and scare them when I'm not home and start talking to them on the home base station and stuff like that. But that's okay. I don't have that, but that's okay. Yeah, you might. And so there you go. There's some fun for you. But in a case of any type of emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology, which is exclusively from Simply Safe, to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so that you get priority first response. So don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system that I recommend. Get 50% off, 50% off of any Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a look at what the New Orleans Saints need to get done against that Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And it's not going to be easy. Let's just be honest. This is not going to be an easy situation for the New Orleans Saints. So let's break it all down. The biggest and most important thing that the Saints are going to have to do is protect the pocket. You got Andy Dalton back there. He's not going to be able to create with his legs. He's not going to be able to extend plays, not very often at least. And so you have got to protect the pocket here. And there are a couple of different ways that you can get crafty. And not all of it is just about protection on the offensive line, because remember, the Saints offensive line is banged up, right? We might not see, I don't think you should expect to see Eric McCoy, might not see Andrus Peat out there. Ryan Ramczyk has missed some time, but it looks like it's a little bit more rest than anything else. I think you're going to see Ryan Ramczyk on the injury report pretty much for the rest of the season at this point, but barring anything unforeseen, I think you'll see him out there. You're just going to see them be really kind of cautious and limit him during practice. So the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to get about 25%, right, a quarter of their defensive salary spending back if TJ Watt hits the field. The Pittsburgh Steelers famously invested over $100 million in their defense. TJ Watt's about $25 million of that. And that's why when you look at sort of where the Steelers defense has ranked over the course of the season, it's probably not actually indicative of what the Steelers defense will look like this weekend against the Saints. And some of that simply has to do with getting TJ Watt back. He opens up opportunities by winning on the edge and demanding defense on the edge, or demanding attention on the edge for some of these other guys of the defensive line to get one-on-one matchups against guys that don't have a lot of reps for the New Orleans Saints offensive line. And therefore, if they win those one-on-ones, then you're going to get pressure in the pocket. The Steelers defense is 31st in the NFL when it comes to passing yards allowed, 31st in the NFL when it comes to passing touchdowns allowed, 30th in the NFL when it comes to net yards per attempt. Remember, that takes into account passing attempts minus sacks divided by passing yards minus sack yards lost. So, that takes into account how efficient your offense has been, your defense has been in terms of allowing yardage, allowing completions, but also taking into consideration how often you're getting to the quarterback and the negative yardage you're enforcing with sacks. And they're 30th in the NFL in that metric, third from the bottom. But is that indicative of what we're going to see this weekend with TJ Watt very likely back? I don't think that it is. And so the other way that you end up not only limiting defense with not just with the offensive line, but limiting pressure, is you make them stay true to the run game. So you've got to be able to produce on the ground. That's where guys like Devin Bush, Highsmith, some of these other defenders, even guys like Demonte Casey, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Terrell Edmonds, these guys that also are safeties and can play very aggressively downhill against the run, that's where they also come into the equation. So you have to be able to run the ball here. So who are your go-to players when it comes to getting the run started? Well, of course, Alvin Kamara is one of them, but Taysom Hill absolutely has to be one of them as well. The Saints faced 4 different third and shorts last week. 3 of them were 3rd and 1. Taysom Hill didn't touch the ball on any of them things, and they only picked up, one of those? So I think you have to get Taysom Hill involved as a runner. You have to get Taysom Hill involved as a pass catcher if you can too, but you got to get him involved as a runner. You got to get Alvin Kamara going as well. And part of that is for the defense to hold up on their end. That way you don't get into a deficit. But even against Baltimore, even early on, the Saints kind of just assumed that quarterback power, getting Taysom Hill out to the edge just wasn't going to work. Don't do that here. Challenge them. Make them prove that to you, right? Run it. Go after them. Make them prove that you can't do it. Once you do that, then that ends up backing the blitz off a little bit. Play action starts to work, things like that. The other thing that happens is that you start to create hesitation by the defense. When you create hesitation by the defense, then you can start to take advantage of things with a quick passing game. If you can just get Jarvis Landry back out on the field this week, which would be great. He practiced all last week. He's practiced so far this week. We'll see if he gets out there. Then all of a sudden you have your quick slant game and everything that you also have back. And then Chris Olave is not carrying the entire weight of the wide receiver position, basically. Now, Chris Olave, despite carrying the entire weight of the entire wide receiver position, he has still had a positive impact on the passing game. And he'll continue to have a positive impact on the passing game. His ability to find the soft spots in zones. He plays coming back to the ball and attacking the ball. He understands the rules about where to go with defensive leverage and understanding that at the same time as the quarterback. He understands if the quarterback is scrambling, the rules about where he needs to get to. He does everything so well, especially for a rookie. But for the Saints, they need another threat there. Juwan Johnson has kind of been that guy as well, but you can use another threat even outside of that. And I think if you can get Jarvis Landry out, that will help. You get the quick passing game going, then all of a sudden what you're forcing the defense to do is that you're putting them in conflict. They have to be and stay true to the run game, which causes hesitation at the snap because every defender should be playing the run first, particularly in the box. And then if the quick passing game is there, then it forces you to lose depth over on the defensive side because you're trying to make sure that you're not getting yards after catch. You're not allowing yards after catch. You're trying to make tackles at the catch point. Once that happens and you get both hesitation and a lack of depth by the defense, then you take the top off. So if the Saints are able to do that, then that's the way that they keep this defense kind of condensed, kind of squashed. TJ Watt's going to get his. Okay. Devin Bush is going to get his. Minkah Fitzpatrick's going to get his. You just have to make sure you're getting yours over on the offensive side as well. And one of the big ways to do that too, just to make sure that this isn't even about like matchup, but in terms of putting points up on the board, is stop coming up empty in the red zone. You know it works in the red zone. Do it. That's got to be a big key. You do all those things, you could be, with a win, tied for first place in the NFC South. How absolutely wild is that? BetOnline's the place to go to get all of your odds, lines, and props more than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. BetOnline line for this game has the New Orleans Saints favored on the road by 1.5 points. 1.5 point favorites on the road. Over-under is set at 40. Saints against the over-under so far this season are 5-4. Against the spread so far this season, 3-6. On the road, they perform pretty well. So if the Saints can knock out a win here, that's huge for them. Could be huge for your pocketbook as well. Pocketbook? Do we have to sell pocketbooks? Could be huge for your bank account as well. Go and check it out. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, y'all. After the game, post-cast, as soon as I'm done with all the post-game media stuff, I'll figure out if the Steelers will let me do it at the field. I would love to do that. That's a historical field there. So I'd love to see if I can do that in the press box. If not, I'll go back to the hotel and then we'll get started. I'll try to tweet out so that you know exactly what's going on. And then, of course, that one will be live on YouTube and then posted to audio soon after. And then we'll have the full episode up later as well. So be ready for some post-cast discussion, win or lose, when it comes to these New Orleans Saints. Appreciate y'all as always making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out that Locked On Sports Today podcast so that you can see what's going on all around the world of sports, the biggest stories, instant reactions, game recaps, and the take of the day. Make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Check them out on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate you as always making me a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.